Good evening and welcome to Gloucester Stage. Thanks for being here.
Well, this is so fun, and our community is expanding tonight because there's a whole crowd of people from Endicott College up there, because that is where Gab is connected. And I just wanted to say thank you to the storytellers for helping raise funds and money for the Gloucester Writer Center. It's a donation, and we appreciate it, so thank you. The first storyteller tonight is Michelle Mustone, and Michelle is as close to a Gloucester native as one not born on island can get. She is a proud member of Gloucester's famous Bader clan. She's also a lawyer, but now prefers coordinating programs for the School of Education at Endicott College. Michelle.
Okay, so this is a story about a guest not knowing the rules. When I was younger, I worked at a whale watching company, and one weekend I took my sister-in-law, Heidi, and my little Vanessa niece to go on a whale watch. Now, Heidi is a wonderful person, but very introverted and quiet and shy. So there's one rule with Heidi: you can't leave her alone with strangers because she might have to talk to them. So I go to the snack bar to get something for Vanessa, and I look back and I see a guy chatting her up at the stern of the boat, and I'm thinking, oh, this is not good. She's going to be upset. It's going to ruin the whole day. So I run back, and she turns around smiling at me, and she says, Michelle, this is Mark. Mark, this is my sister-in-law, Michelle. Okay, and she says more words I've ever heard her say in the whole time I have known her. She starts to tell me Mark's whole life story up to today. She says, so Mark's from England, and he lives in Chester, which is a walled city, you know, like the Romans made, and he's always loved whales, and they don't have any whales in England, so he always wanted to come to America to see the whales that we have. So on the day he got divorced, he decided he was going to get on a plane and fly to America and see the whales. So on that day, he got on a plane with no luggage, no money, no contacts, no reservations, no nothing, and he got on the plane, slept at Logan Airport last night on the floor, took the train to Gloucester this morning, walked from the train station to the boat, and here we are. I awkwardly say, okay. Then she continues and tells me, hey, you know how your parents have exchange students every summer at the house? And that's true. We've had exchange students ever since I can remember. But I think, how can I tell Heidi with just my eyes that those people have been vetted by a company and come here for educational experiences and bring them over? And how can I tell her again, just with my eyes, that Mark might be a serial killer, as evidenced by the fact that he just jumped on a plane the day he got divorced with nothing to show for it and came here? Apparently I can't, because the next words out of her mouth are, so I invited him to stay with us tonight. Okay, so I don't really say anything because I know the rule about serial killers. You don't want to make them mad, like with bad news or anything. So for the next 3.5 hours, we are trapped on this boat with a potential serial killer, my 6-year-old niece and my sister-in-law, and they all have a jolly good time watching the whales. At the end of the trip, we're disembarking and getting off and thinking, what am I doing? How am I going to get out of this? What am I going to say? And then I think, when we get home, my father is going to put an end to this nonsense. I don't have to worry. But then I remember there's 2 things working against me. One, my parents are old school hippies, and they love people and love talking to people and want people to come in the house. And secondly, my father knows I am a strict rule follower. And I can tell when I get out of the car by his face that he thinks I have approved this whole situation, and he believes all the rules have been followed up to this point. So they welcome the weary British traveler with open arms, and they take him in the house. Now, in his defense, Mark seems like a really nice guy. But as every woman in this room knows, so did Ted Bundy. So they're all in my house, and this is the second part of the story with a different set of rules that apply to my family. We're in the house, it's a hot August night, the doors are open, the windows are open, and my mother is deathly afraid of insects. It's a phobia that she can't let go of, And we have all been conscripted into her army of the war on bugs. We all have a job in my family. So Mark and my parents are sitting on the couch, Vanessa and Heidi over there, my brother with the dog on the ottoman, and I'm leaning against the door jamb. And all of a sudden I hear, and I see a Japanese beetle flying from the hallway coming into the living room. I immediately come to attention to do my job, and I try to get the bug, but I miss. But I have alerted my brother and the dog, because the dog knows the rules too, to get up and get the bug. So the dog is jumping at the bug. My brother's swatting the bug. I'm trying to get over to the bug. My father is shielding my mother with his body, just in case any bug shrapnel gets across the room. I don't know why. My mother, who has not seen the bug, but knows the rules of engagement, has curled up in a ball and covered her head, just in case. So the battle has begun, and we are all over the living room trying to get this Japanese beetle. Eventually, my brother is able to swat it with a magazine, stomp on it with his foot, kill the bug, and we are victorious. So all this time, Mark has been sitting on the couch like a statue, watching everything. He looks up to me, and I see beer poised between the table and his mouth, and he says to me, "Is it poisonous?" And I say, "Oh no, Mark, there's a whole nother set of rules for poison bugs." That's the end.
Thank you, Michelle. Our next storyteller is Gail Cantor, and the Reverend Dr. Gail Cantor is the chaplain and director of spiritual life at Endicott College, but she is active in the promotion of cultural justice, mindfulness, pause, appreciation, and gratitude practices regionally, nationally, and internationally. And I know that whenever I have a project that I want to make happen at Endicott, I run to Gail and say, "Please help me," and she always does. Thank you, Gail.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm going to tell a story that I've told many, many times because it's an old story, but it's a story of a guest, a time when I was invited as a guest, and instead of going myself, I had a replacement guest, and I kind of questioned my own judgment, so you might question it as well. It was back in 1979. I was 25 years old. I had always lived in Boston, never left. I was working for a seminar company that put on transformational consciousness seminars, and I get transferred to Atlanta. And so I moved to Atlanta, Georgia. I've never been anywhere. I'm down in the South. I'm there. And I get a call from my old manager, and she said, "Gail, you are invited to be a guest at a very small reception with the Dalai Lama next week." And I'm flipping out because at that time, there weren't yoga studios in every corner. There wasn't, not everybody knew who the Dalai Lama was. Not everybody knew who everybody was at that time. But our organization was bringing people in from a lot of these Eastern leaders over to the West. And so I think, what am I going to do? I can't afford to go home. I just can't do it. I'll send my mother. Now, you need... My mother, she passed away a while ago, but my mother was born in 1915. She was a very simple Jewish mother, immigrant parents, not very educated, but she had a characteristic that everybody who knew my mother, which was a lot of people, because she sold shoes in the middle of Coolidge Corner in Brookline at a store, Cancellation Shoe Store, for many, many years. She was very famous for that. But anyway, the one thing about my mother was she laughed. And when she laughed, everybody laughed. And she would just lose it over the most ridiculous, like not over anything that was really that funny, but just over the most ridiculous things. So anyway, she's my choice. I call her, I tell her, "You must go to this. It's going to be amazing. He's a very holy man." So she starts treating it a little bit like a bar mitzvah or an event, gets the outfit together. She's worried about how she's getting there, anyway, we get all the arrangements made, and she goes, and I am flipping out in Atlanta the whole night. Anyway, she gets there, and I don't hear a word. I get up the next morning, I call her, I said, "What happened?" and I'm a little bit nuts from the whole thing, but at this point, and she goes on her whole litany about whose wife is taller than whose husband, and did I know this about this one, and I'm like, oh my word, what did I do? Anyway, I said, well, what happened with the Dalai Lama? She said, well, they had this reception line, and I got in. I said, okay, that doesn't sound too bad. I said, what happened when you met him? She goes, he started to laugh. I said, what do you mean he started to laugh? She goes, you know, like I laugh. I said, oh, no. She said, yeah, then I said, what did you do? She goes, well, I laughed. And I said, well, what did he do? He laughed. Anyway, evidently this went on, and I confirmed it with others. This went on for a while. I said, then what happened? She said, well, then he turned to one of his guys, the monks, okay? He turned to one of his guys. And she never could tell. She never told it any other way her whole life. Anyway, but he asked him for something, and he gave him a big silk scarf, and then he gave that to me. And now I'm really flipping out. And I said, well, what did you do with it? Where is it? She goes, it's under my mattress. He's a very holy man. I'm like, okay. Years later, fast forward, it's 2003, and my mother passes away. And my brother and I, she had been in a nursing home for a couple years before she died. And we went to clean out her room and get her belongings and whatever. And as I'm leaving the room, I have this moment, and I think, look under the mattress. So I look under the mattress, and sure enough, there's the scarf. He was a very holy man, and it made me realize what a holy woman she was in her laughter. So thank you very much.
Wow, that was beautiful. Thank you, Gail. Our next storyteller is Todd Wemmer. Todd is an Atlanta native and teaches podcasting in the communications department at Endicott. His field is lost and found stories, and he has photographed almost every member of the Endicott community, including me, faculty, staff, student, and Gary. Maybe you're going to explain who Gary is?
So this is a lost and found story, and it's really the only kind of stories I usually tell. The first time I tried to reunite a family with their lost photos, it was this big photo album that my aunt had bought at an estate sale in Tennessee. I'm from Georgia, and I was living up here. And she bought it and gave it to me because I had been collecting old photos. And I took the album, and it was beautiful. It traced this family from the young couple's honeymoon in the 1930s all the way up to the 1960s and their first child. And it's just a beautiful album. And I looked in the front side of the cover, and it had the name of the man who was in the album, Rufus Elliott. And so I thought, here's this album, it's a beautiful album, and there's his name, I'm gonna Google Rufus Elliott. So I Google Rufus Elliott, and right away up comes this website, and this is like 2000, so before social networks. And Rufus Elliott had played the fiddle up on Lookout Mountain, and it described him as an elderly man. And so I emailed this venue and just said, I have this photo album, and it has this man named Rufus Elliott, and his son and wife named Rita, and his son was named Herndon. And so after a few emails back and forth, I got an email from Herndon and said, I understand you have our family photo album. And I wrote him back, and I said, yes, I think this is it. And he said, we would like to have it back. We would pay you within reason. And I said, there's nothing I'd rather do than give you this photo album back. And so I took it back and agreed to meet with them. I also asked them if I could record them, which they thought was a little weird, but that's what I did. And so I went there and gave it back to them. And there was this, this great, they were just so glad to have this album back. And I was a little disappointed after giving it back because it was so easy to find them. There was no mystery involved. I just Googled their name and took it back, and there would be no story afterwards, no relationship. But then I thought, well, this is my new thing I'm going to do in life. I'm going to reunite people with their lost photos. I'm going to get maybe even a TV show or something like that, where I'm going around the world reuniting people with their lost photo albums. So I tried to do this with some other photographs, and it just didn't. I couldn't find anybody else with anybody's photos album. So all these, and so then I just say, that I'm going to just keep collecting photos because I love old photographs, and they've become like guests in my house. They don't speak though, and they can't even whisper. They're very quiet. And so I collected, I've been collecting photos for the last 20 years. And this last summer, I was in a shop in Salem, and it was this big box of photographs. And I go in there and buy dollar snapshots. And I was looking through it, and I found this cassette tape. And I thought, this is interesting. And I pick it up, and on the label on the tape, it said, "From Maryland with love." And so I thought, this is great. So I take the cassette up with a few snapshots. The cassette was $1, and I take it home, and then I put it in the tape player. I hit play, and out comes this woman's voice, and she is introducing "Baby, It's Cold Outside" to her boyfriend Welton, and the whole tape, and I listened to it, is a collection of love songs, and she introduces each song on this tape. And I get to the very end of the tape, and it ends in this grand fashion, and this was the good part of the tape. She declares her love to Welton, like just epic. "I love you, Welton, more than anything in the world, but don't ever play this tape for anybody, especially the mushy parts." And then she reconsiders and she says, "You can play this tape for anybody you want. I love you that much." So then I go back, I wonder if there were more tapes. I didn't even look. So I go back the next day, and I'm looking around. I didn't see any cassette tapes, but I saw this big manila envelope, looked like it had stuff in it, and it said on the label, on the address, "Welton Parker." And that was the man that she was talking to on the tape. So I pick it up, I look in the envelope, and it's stuffed with love letters, just stuffed. And and it's got a few photos, so now I know what they look like. And I take that home, and here I am again. Now I'm thinking, maybe I can get this going again. I can get my TV show going. And so I take it, and now we have Facebook, so I didn't even use Google. I just go on Facebook, and I put in Welton Parker, and up comes a picture of Welton Parker, just an older version of the pictures that I had seen. And the post that popped up on the screen was him announcing Marilyn's death. And so, I just thought, this is too, it just almost perfectly, here's this narrative going along. And the post had been made a year before, so it had been about a year. And so I send him a message. And I say, "Welton," I tell him who I am. Anytime you're trying to reunite somebody with something, you're trying to convince them you're not a crazy person. That's part of it. And so I say I have this cassette tape, and it's this mixtape with this woman named Marilyn. And he said, she used to send me these mixtapes. I would love to have this back. And he was living in Kentucky now. So I said, of course, I'm going to send you the tape. So I send him the tape, and then he sends me a message, and he's just so thankful to get this tape, and how much it means to hear her voice and everything like that. And then here I am again, kind of disappointed, right? Because it's a story, I just found it, I went inside, I put it in Facebook, and there it is. And so again, just kind of disappointed with my lost and found story. But that's probably why I still haven't told him about the letters or the photos. So, thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Our next storyteller is Heather Atwood, and Heather is not a professor at Endicott College. Heather's a Massachusetts native, as well as a Cape Ann promoter, researcher, and project coordinator. She's a producer for 1623 Studios and The Other Cape, and published in Cod We Trust, A History of Cape Ann Cooking Traditions and Cultures. Heather, yes, is the only storyteller tonight who isn't connected to Endicott, but she's our friend.
1988 Memorial Day weekend. I knew I had two things I had to do. One was write a 10-page term paper, and two was break up with my boyfriend. I was living in Boston, and the boyfriend had recently moved to Vermont for a new job, and the long-distance thing was not working out, except he did not know that yet, and my assignment would be, when he came down on Sunday, to let him know. So I started the paper on Saturday morning. I lived in those years in the north end of Boston, so all my academic work was done at the Café de la Sport on Hanover Street with a cappuccino in front of me. 2 cappuccinos in, I decided to quit the paper for the day because Mike's coming down tomorrow and he's going to do a U-turn back to Vermont, and I will have all afternoon to write. So we had decided to meet in Harvard Square. I don't really remember why we decided Harvard Square, but I think it had to do with the fact that I thought if he was in my own neighborhood, it would be harder to send him away. So there we are, Sunday morning of Memorial Day weekend, standing on the corner of Dunster Street and Mass Ave. We are basically, the city is evacuated. We are those, odd people who are still in the city on a long weekend. It's us breaking up, a couple of brilliant people walking by with knapsacks, and the Harvard Square chess players. But I am making progress with this breakup. It's been about an hour and a half, and I can see Mike transitioning from shock laced with horror or hatred or something to resignation laced with hope. He is actually considering leaving on the condition that we review the relationship in a couple of weeks. So we are gradually, slowly leaving the chess players and moving up Mass Ave towards his parked Ford Focus with the new Vermont plates. And then we both see it. He has a flat tire. He has a flat tire on the Sunday of Memorial Day weekend when every garage owner in the city and Boston is on Cape Cod putting their boat in the water. And I see my plan fall apart. I'm thinking, he has no spare. I know he has no spare. We won't get this tire fixed until Tuesday. All that conviction of the last hour and a half is about to dissolve, and I'm going to say to him, so should we just get something to eat? But that did not happen. For at least part of the time that I was breaking up with Mike, there had been a witness besides the chess players. A couple of yards away was a young man, a little older than we were, about medium height, thin, auburn hair, kind of very Boston Irish, leaning against a parking meter. And at that point, he stepped forward and said, "Excuse me, but I know where you can get that tire fixed." And that's what we did. We got in this guy's car. His name was Tim. We drove to the garage that he knew about. We drove back to Mike's car. Mike, a little confused, didn't know whether to hit Tim or thank him, did get in his car and start driving off to White River Junction, Vermont. Oh my God, thank you so much. That was so great. I am so relieved. You have no idea how helpful that was. I have to go write a paper right now, but can I buy you a beer or a cup of coffee in a little bit and say thank you? These sentences poured out of me. Tim said, "Sorry, I'm leaving for Italy tomorrow for 2 months." Now, I knew nothing about Tim, and the sane part of me was relieved that he was leaving the country and he could not accept my unfiltered offer. But sane did not prevail. The fact that he could not accept my unfiltered offer and he was leaving for the most civilized country on earth just encouraged me. Oh my gosh, I love Italy. Oh, it's just the best. My best friends live in northern Italy. It's so beautiful. You should go stay with them. You should go visit them. Meet me at the Café de la Sport tonight for a cup of coffee and I'll give you their address. The Café de la Sport. I figured it was, I knew everybody there. It was well lit. It seemed reasonable, right? So I arrive an hour early. I have my pile of books because I'm going to work on my paper. So I've got my paper, my pile of books. I'm going to have a cappuccino before he gets there, get some work done. And I also bring along a journal. And the journal is one of those black rectangular things, and it has, along with my writing, lots of photographs and drawings of my friend's farm in Italy. So the meeting with Tim is kind of unmemorable. I can see him better. He's very thin in a taut way. He sits up very straight in his chair, almost at military attention. And I show him the photographs that are spotted through the journal, my friend's farm, Lake Como, the Alps, and he really doesn't say very much. He's kind of quiet. He smiles a lot. He does offer about himself that he grew up in Chelsea, played hockey, went to Harvard, and had been a Navy SEAL. So the whole thing seems kind of formal, very polite, not at all flirtatious, and not at all unsafe. After about an hour, we say goodbye. He tells me, he says to me if he does go see my friends in Italy, he will actually let me know. He'll contact me when he gets back. I say thank you again for the tire. The next morning, I wake up and I'm ready to go right to work on that paper. I have a few more edits to do. I'm going to get that done and turn it in. The paper's gone. I rifle through the books, like, where's the paper? It's not there. I think I must have stuck it in the journal. I go looking for the journal. The journal's gone. I grab my coat thinking I must have left them all, the journal at the Café de la Sport. So I grab my coat, I go out the door, open the door, and there on the floor in the hallway is my journal. I pick it up, the paper's there, but there's also a note. The note reads, "When I saw this writing, I had to steal this book. I read the whole thing. Thank you for all of it. I will not ever contact you again because I know an unfair amount about you. I also know that you were always worried about money." And from the journal fluttered a crisp, new $100 bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. I want to find a $100 bill on my doorstep. Our next storyteller is Dana Munson. Dana is from Western Massachusetts and teaches Spanish at Endicott College. A native of the 413, Dana was born in Northampton and raised across 2 towns and 1 zip code.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So in 1999, I was living in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I was 26, and my good girlfriend, Kim, asked me if I wanted to go to the Boundary Waters with a big group of women that she knew, who I didn't. And I didn't know what the Boundary Waters were. I lived in downtown Minneapolis. I was a waitress at a jazz club. I lived in the city. But I discovered it is this enormous, million-acre wilderness between Minnesota and Canada. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go. And so I was the guest. This yearly trip, this big group of women friends took together. And I've always been kind of a tomboy my whole life. Definitely not a girly girl. But with these women, I felt more feminine and more girly girl than I ever had my whole life. But in a good way. They took great care of me. They were expert outdoors women. They went to the Boundary Waters every year. We had to walk for miles and miles and miles with the canoes over our head, and then we would canoe through the water, and there's only 2 places where you can sit to paddle, and so the third person sits in what I learned is called duff, and that was me. I felt like I should have had like a canopy over me with like fans. But it was wonderful, and when we got to our campsite that night, it took us almost 6-7 hours to get. We were hundreds of miles away from civilization. They went and caught huge walleye fish, and they smashed the heads with rocks. It was so badass. I was very impressed. And the next morning when we woke up, they were getting ready to go fishing, and they asked me if I wanted to come along fishing, and I was like, no, that's okay. I think I want to, just have a little me time, write in my journal, hang out at the campsite, and just kind of commune with nature, whatnot. And they were like, all right, that's fine. So I had like a little sundress on and my journal, and I went down by the lake, and as they're pushing off their canoes, they were like, hey, you know what? There's an island that we're going to be passing on our way to the fishing site if you want to, get dropped off there, and you can, hang out there, and then it's something different than the campsite. Sure, why not? So I'm on the island by myself. It's lovely. It's a beautiful July day. It's July 4th. And I'm like, why not be naked, right? Like, I mean, I'm in the middle of nowhere. And, I'm 26, I'm writing in my journal, it's me time. So I'm writing my journal naked in the middle, and there's nobody around. And all of a sudden, the wind starts blowing a little bit. And then the sky turns dark green. And then debris is blowing sideways. And it was surreal. Is this really happening? And then it got real. Trees started falling all around me. And it just survival instinct kicked in. I ran inland, and there was a rock in like a little indentation, and I went down like in a fetal position, and trees are falling all around me. There's debris, it's hitting me all over my body, and I'm like, what? And it passes, it's gone, and the sky's blue. And I put my clothes on, and I'm like, there are trees just as far as the eye can see. They're just flattened. It's crazy. The lake is covered with pine needles. It was like I just dreamt it. Was this real? Are my women friends okay? Is someone going to pick me up on this island? But they did. And this is way before cell phones. So miraculously, everybody was okay, but the destruction around us was just crazy. When we go back to the campsite, in the tent that I would have been hanging out in that day if I had not accepted their invitation was covered in old growth trees that had impaled their branches into the ground. And it was crazy. And I think that, what does this have to do with a guest? Well, I was their guest. The storm was this unexpected guest. But I think what I learned that day is that, wow, you never know what's going to happen. And I think that Mother Nature had other plans for us. And I spent 4th of July in Ely, Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Our next storyteller is Liz Mitelski. Liz is one of 30 or so people born on Michigan's Upper Peninsula and now teaches history at Endicott College. She's happy to tell you that she grew up a Lions fan, but without too much regret became a Packers fan when she became a Milwaukee resident.
This is the story of my very first half marathon and how it went terribly wrong. I love sports, but I'm not a runner. My wife, however, is a runner, and she decided I should become a runner too. She said this is something we could do together, spend more time together. What an idiot I was. We started off small, just 2-mile runs. I built up my endurance to run my first 5K. That 5K became a 10K, and I still remember that smug, superior feeling of finishing my first 5K and seeing another runner puking their guts out at the finish line while I still felt fine. Idiot. The next step on my roadway to hell was to train for a half marathon. The transition from a 5K to a 10K had been reasonable, but training for a half marathon took a lot of work. We cut back on going out, we cut back on drinking, which is a feat to do when you live in Milwaukee. We sacrificed our Saturday mornings by doing long runs on Lake Michigan, but I told myself that those sacrifices would be all worth it as soon as I crossed that finish line. What a dum-dum. The morning of my first marathon, half marathon, I felt great. I made sure that I got water at every hydration station. I made sure that I kept my pace really slow and steady, even though my adrenaline was surging. This was going to be great. Around mile 9, I really started to get tired. My hip flexors were just tired of this same repetitious movement. Had I always been running? Was this ever going to stop? I had long lost track of my wife. She was a much faster runner than I, and typically on race days, she would run ahead of me. We would meet up at the finish line. She'd have a bottle of water in one hand, a bottle of Gatorade in the other for me. What had started off as an activity that we did together had eventually transitioned into an activity we both did. But I didn't mind. I didn't mind. It was fine. I wasn't a very strong runner, and I didn't want to hold her back. Around mile 10, I started to sweat. It was actually kind of the perfect day for a long run. It was a little cool, a little overcast. But around mile 11, I really started to feel it. My body was just in cruise control. There was no thoughts, just movement. I definitely had started to sweat, and even my legs had started to feel a little wet. I'm not sure what made me look down at my legs at that very moment, but I did. What I had thought was sweat was actually blood. I had bled through my tampon. In all of my race day preparation, picking out the perfect race day playlist, making sure my toes and my heels were taped to avoid blisters, picking out the perfect race day outfit, both cute and non-chafing. I hadn't thought to pack a tampon. My first emotion was embarrassment. How long had I been running like this? How long had I been running with blood visibly running down my legs? How many other people, other runners and spectators had seen me and didn't say anything to me? My next emotion was panic. What was I going to do? Could I keep running? Should I keep running? I couldn't quit. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have a wallet, nothing. I was still 2 miles away from the finish line. Walking would only prolong my embarrassment, and stupidly, I was still worried about my finish time. The more I lingered there, the longer, the more seconds were ticking away. So I really only had one choice. I had to finish the race. So I took off my shirt, and I used it to wipe away the blood on my legs. The material was advertised as sweat wicking, but I don't think the company ever imagined me using their product for what I was about to do. I rolled up the t-shirt, shoved it into my running shorts, and fashioned something akin to a sumo wrestler's thong. Luckily, my running shorts had built-in underwear, so I didn't have to worry about losing my new adult diaper between there and the finish line. And I ran the rest of the race like that, in my sports bra, in my running shorts, distended like a diaper. I wish I could say that I finished the race in those final 2 miles in my fastest time ever, but my body was over it. Every step was more excruciating than the one before, and I nearly burst into tears when I saw both the finish line and my wife at the horizon. I'm sure that my altered appearance, as well as my delayed race time, was alarming to my wife, and she came up to me at the finish line and said, "What happened?" But I was too embarrassed to admit, even to her, what had happened. My body was over it, but I just kept moving. I just kept moving beyond the finish line. Adrenaline, embarrassment still just surging through my body. I made it straight to the public bathroom, which was, of course, crowded with other women. I stepped into that room and I said, "Does anyone have a tampon?" Amazingly, I still continue to run half marathons, even that ordeal. And I can laugh about it today. I can tell you all about it today. But I'll never forget that very first, very memorable half marathon and that unexpected guest. Thanks.
Thank you, Liz. Our last storyteller is also the resident storyteller at Fishtails, Gab Watling. Gab is originally from North Queensland, the Mississippi of Australia. She grew up celebrating Christmas in the middle of summer, surrounded by the smell of ripe mangoes and flocks of rainbow lorikeets.
Okay. Take a deep breath. Okay, so despite my mother's constant warnings, I hitchhiked all the time when I was a teenager. I would hitchhike to school if I missed the bus. I would hitchhike to summer jobs if I missed the bus. I'd hitchhike to parties because there was no bus. But by the time I became a graduate student, I had my own little truck, very proud of my little truck. And I, of course, picked up hitchhikers all the time, despite my mother's constant warnings not to. On one occasion, I picked up a happy crew of Italian tourists, put them in the back of the truck, drove them the 4 hours from my college town up to my hometown. They sang and drank the whole way. And when I dropped them off, they asked me, when was I coming back again? God bless them. I would pick up teenagers, not unlike myself, who just needed to get from one place to another. On one occasion, it was Christmas, and I was going home for Christmas, and I spotted a poor, damp, exhausted young man under a tree. And I thought, oh, well, he needs a lift. So I stopped and picked him up. He was an English boy. As we say in Australia, he was a pommy boy. And so I packed him into the truck and off we went. And within a mile or so, I had invited him to the family Christmas. Come and have family Christmas with us. This was not an unusual thing in my family. This was a common practice that if we came across somebody who was interesting, glamorous, charismatic, exotic in some way, then they were welcome to family occasions. So I thought, oh yeah, I've got my guy. But a couple of miles down the road, I discovered that he was none of those things. He was completely unremarkable. I could not find a topic that interested him in the slightest little bit. He wasn't interested in Australia. He wasn't interested in sport, which was my love. He wasn't even interested in England. And I thought, well, how am I going to explain this to the family? So we got up there, and of course, he found them completely uninteresting. They found him completely uninteresting. Christmas came and went, and I thought the best gift that I can give to my family is to get this young man out of here. And he had no plans. So, it wasn't like I could say to him, can I drop you off anywhere? No, I had to actually remove him from the house. But I thought, I'm going to give it one last shot because this is a beautiful part of the world. We have lots and lots of beautiful scenic places, and I'm going to take him to some of the places that, sort of gave me joy as a child. So off we went, and the one place I was really looking forward to taking him to was a national park with an extinct volcano in it, an extinct volcanic crater, which I had always been thrilled to go to when we were children. So we drove into the deserted car park and we set off on the mile or so track down to the crater. Raging river underneath us at the bottom of the trail, sheer cliffs on the other side of us, studded with rainforest trees and vegetation and colourful birds. We got to the crater. It's astonishing. I've seen it 44 times. It's astonishing. 200-foot rock walls down to a mysterious black pool, birds flying in and out, antediluvial ferns stuck into the side of the thing. And, there I was in wonder and glanced at him and, of course, nothing. Kicking at the ground, hands in pockets. I said to him, do you know, scientists still haven't found the bottom of the pool. I said, locals sometimes tumble in and have to be spectacularly rescued. Nothing. And I thought, okay, I have done my bet. I've done my best for this young man. We're going back on the road. And so we got back onto the track. A couple of yards down the track, he suddenly starts talking. And he says, I was supposed to be doing this travelling much earlier, but I got arrested for murdering my girlfriend. Did I mention the raging river at the bottom of the cliffs, the bottomless crater, the deserted car park? In the silence that followed, I was imagining the next day's headlines. Naive woman asks for it in remote national park. Police searching for charmless pom. He must have sensed in my silence that he needed to add more to the story, and so he hastily said, "Oh, I didn't do it. It was somebody else. The police caught the bloke about a week later, and they let me go." Now, I was not in a position to confirm or deny this additional information, but I did think that it was somewhat ironic that this unremarkable person actually could turn out to be a person of interest.